So, as harvest closes in on its last month, I couldn't help but notice that a huge portion of the community still hasn't delved into crafting. Some people don't understand how it works, some people think it requires a huge amount of currency to get into, and others simply don't want to touch crafting altogether, and that's fine. For those first couple groups though, I figured I'd make a quick little guide on how to craft some extremely solid gear this league. Because honestly, going by what GUG has said about Harvest in regards to it going core, it's very unlikely players will see this kind of power available in crafting for quite some time, if ever. Now's definitely the time to give it a try, even if you've never jumped into crafting before, whether that's because you're new to PoE and this is your first league, or because you just haven't given it a go in the past. I'd hate for anyone to miss out on this fantastic, albeit a little bit imbalanced system. And I mean that in the best possible way. It's a ton of fun. As someone who loves Harvest, but won't be surprised if we don't see this kind of crafting again, I hope I can at least convince a couple people to give it a try. Because when you do craft something amazing, it feels a little bit like cheating. Alright, I'm going to do a quick rundown of all the different crafts before I jump into an example. Here we have Reforge with X modifier. It basically means we're using a Chaos Orb, which will randomly roll the item, with a guaranteed mod. It's often good for crafting a base item. Because this craft is so common, you can keep using it until you hit a mod that you want. So for example, you could do Reforge with Life until you hit a high tier life roll that you want, or you could do Reforge with Crit on Tailwind boots, that way you're guaranteed the Tailwind mod, on Hunter boots that is, because it's the only crit mod that you can roll. And then you can work around the Tailwind by using other mods. Reforge with X modifier, with X being more likely, is the same thing, but it makes that mod more likely to show up, and it guarantees you at least one. So this is really good for items where you want multiples of the same type of mod. Physical weapons, for example, are really good to start with this craft, because it will guarantee you at least one Fizz mod, which is flat, percent, hybrid, mana leech, or life leech. So it guarantees you one of them, and makes the others much more likely to show up. And on a Fizz weapon, you tend to want everything besides the leech. So you want Fizz, percent Fizz that is, flat Fizz, as well as a hybrid. Remove a random mod basically just does exactly what it says. It removes one mod with that tag. So for example, remove a random physical mod on this body armor would have to remove the Fizz damage reduction. It's the only mod on the item with the physical tag, so it would have to remove that one in particular. It's really good for if you're, say, a CI character, you've got some life on your gear because you just did a transition. It's a really easy way of removing life without risking annulling off, like a high energy shield roll, for example. Here we have remove a modifier and add a mod with the same tag. So these ones remove a physical mod and add a physical mod, as an example. These ones are very good if you have the right stats on an item, but you have the wrong tiers. So say, for example, on this body armor, say I want to keep this, but I need a lot more cold res than 15%. This would allow me to keep all of my other stats, but just reroll the cold res. This is particularly good on mods with very limited mod pools. So for example, body armors. Cold res is the only cold mod that can roll on body armors. So I could keep hitting this body armor with remove a cold, add a cold, until I was happy with my cold resist. Remove a non-anything from an item and add a modifier with that tag. These ones are very good, but they're very difficult to use, and a lot of people misuse them and accidentally brick their items. So the reason why these are so powerful is because they let you target things that aren't normally targetable. So the reason why is because they need to make room for the second part of the craft. So let's say I have an item with 6 mods. Let's take this body armor, for example. The only cold mod available on body armor is cold res. So let's say this body armor had fire res instead of cold res. If I use this mod, it would have to remove the Fizz damage reduction, the fire res, or the lightning resist in order to add cold resist. Because it has to remove a suffix, all of my prefixes are safe. So say I had a perfect prefixes and I didn't want to touch them. I would normally have to just annul and sort of hope for the best, or do a prefixes can't be changed, which requires an open mod slide. But in this case, I can do remove a random non-cold, and it would guaranteedly remove one of the suffixes in exchange for cold resist. Next we have augment. Augments are basically just exalts. That's why they're denoted by a little exalted symbol. A regular augment is just an exalt, but it's targeted, so it narrows down your range of potential mods drastically. These are extremely powerful and should definitely be used instead of regular exalts if that option is available. Not everything can be targeted. As you can see on my body armor, I have an additional curse which has no tag, so I would not be able to augment an item with anything besides influence mods. I could augment my body armor with augment and influence mod, but even still, it's a 1 in 4 or so, maybe a 1 in 5, just because I have a double influence chest piece. Augment an item with a new blank modifier with lucky values is very similar, but it will roll twice. So it keeps the same tier. So let's say I augmented life, and it hit tier 2 life. This craft wouldn't give me a second shot in hitting tier 1 life. What it would do is it would give me a higher likelihood of getting a high range. So tier 2 life on body armors is 110 to 119. It would give me a higher likelihood of getting closer to 119 as opposed to 110. So it's like using a divine on your item after exalting it. So it gives you a higher likelihood of getting a high roll within the range, but it doesn't give you a higher chance of hitting a high range, if that makes sense. Next up we have randomize. Randomize is basically just a targeted divine orb. So it will take one stat and just reroll that one stat. So if I use it on this body armor, for example, it would reroll the life and the armor because it's the same mod. So if I use it on this guy, everything else will stay the same, but the armor and the life will get rerolled to different values within those ranges. And with that, I'll move on to crafting. Alright, so as it turns out, I'm really bad at getting to the point. So instead, I'll try to use this ring to illustrate my point that harvest crafting is pretty easy to get into once you get the hang of it. So we're going to use an essence on this ring. Our goal is to get Assassin's Mark on hit, crit chance, as well as a really high flat damage. The high flat damage can be guaranteed by using a deafening essence of contempt. This actually guarantees you a roll higher than flaring, which is the highest roll you can naturally get on a ring. So for that reason, definitely use your essences of contempt if you're trying to craft an attack-based ring. The stats on it don't matter too much. Our goal is to fill up all of the stats. That way we can use remove non-crit, as these ones are, in order to guarantee ourselves to hit the Assassin's Mark on hit and the crit chance. Because these mods are both suffixes, if we fill up all of our prefixes and all of our suffixes, it must remove a suffix in order to make room for the crit mods. So if there are 3 suffixes already, it needs to remove one in order to add another suffix, because an item can't have more than 3 suffixes. So this ring has 2, so what we're going to do is we're going to head back on to the hideout. We're going to craft any suffix, doesn't matter which one. For that reason, let's just pick a really cheap one. 1 transmutation sounds like a fantastic deal. Head on back to the grove. So now if we take a look at this item, it has, on the right, in case you're curious, it's got fire res, rarity, and cold res. Ideally, we'd like it to remove the rarity and the cold res because the fire res is actually pretty well rolled, but we'll see what we got. So we're going to do 1. Looks like we hit the rarity, perfect. We hit a tier 2 crit chance, that's fine. And 2, hey, perfect. We removed the craft mod as well, the cold res. We hit Assassin's Mark on hit level 8, unfortunately. Not level 12, but still, decent. As for our other stats, we have a max rolled essence mod, which is fantastic. We have a physical attack damage leeches life, which is fine, but we'd prefer flat life, and we have a mana roll. Unfortunately, the mana roll is really difficult to get rid of because there aren't many other mods on rings. We could do remove non-attack. Let me do a quick check on Craft of Exile, jewelry, rings, just to make sure. I was thinking we could do remove non-attack, add attack, because the mana is not an attack modifier. but neither are the crit or the fire mods, and unfortunately there are attack suffixes, so we're kind of stuck with the mana. What we can do is we can do remove life, which will guaranteedly remove the life leech, as it is the only life mod on the ring, and that will open up a prefix. So from here we can either augment a life mod, or what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to my hideout, and I'm going to craft flat life, because I can guarantee a roll at around 50 to 55 life, and that's good enough for me. So we got 44, 41, 41, 44, 42, 53. Perfect. And this craft is very cheap to do. You can see it's only 2 Orbs of Alchemy and 1 Orb of Scouring. Very, very cheap. And this is a totally serviceable ring. It's not the best thing in the world, but hey, you know what? In any other league, I would happily run with this ring in endgame for the entire league. It's got fantastic stats, a decent chunk of resist, pretty good physical damage to attack, crit chance, Assassin's Mark on hit. It's really good. I hope this video can get somebody into crafting. I know it can be a little bit intimidating, particularly with all the new mechanics, but harvest crafting is honestly the best time to get into crafting. It's cheap, it's accessible, seeds are literally thrown at you in every single map. I guarantee you've come across some crafts that you could definitely use.